Control C. Okay, ready? Check one. That seems loud. No, I guess it's okay. Check two. Check three. Check four. Check five.
Okay.
Check six.
Okay. I have time, because they don't start till 5:30. And this is my last laptop, so I'll just set this up and I'm in my office.
You said one was
Okay.
down? Check seven.
That's loud.
Oh, they're all loud.
That one they said was kind of quiet.
Check, check, check.
He sits back though usually. So
Check, check, check.
can't hear. Yeah.
You won't be able to hear me from here.
No.
But he needs to not take a nap.
You tell them that, Eric.
You're hearing Ryan bring in the mic? Okay. Say something, Ryan.
Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3.
Here's our podium.
That was kind of quiet.
Here's your podium.
Same here. Well,
But
this one you have
that's
to be
because
like
people
this.
keep eating it, so we turned it down.
Oh.
How about this one?
Test, 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 test.
Into the mic. Okay.
Got a sec.
Yeah. The podium mic did? Oh, nice. That podium is loud. When you breathe into it. The rest of it should be okay though. Check number 9.
Good enough,
What is that?
They control those settings from technology, so.
Put it in.
I know. Yes. I don't know if that one needs to be, I mean, it does it, so I'll call back there and ask them if they can turn the computer down and not the mics. Because we don't need volume on the computer right now. 'Cause we don't have
Okay, I'll
anything
start
with-
this.
No videos.
Okay, I hereby call this meeting to order. I would like to thank and welcome everyone for being here, and thank you for being here. Courtney will now lead us in the pledge.
Please begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the board is here, all present, and there are a few addenda items, which are human resources addendum, an intern request, food service summer park program information, and board calendar update. And I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the addenda.
Chair, I move that we approve the agenda with the addenda.
I'll second that.
Perfect. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, that passes. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes, but let me read those minutes first there. Executive session and special meeting for labor contract matters and negotiations, that's on May 3rd, 2019. Executive session student discipline, May 8th, 2019. Executive session labor contract matters, May 10th, 2019. We're here a lot.
We're in May.
Work session, special meeting with action and executive session personnel, May 14th, 2019. Executive session personnel and property, May 21st, 2019. Regular board meeting, May 21st, 2019. Executive session student discipline, May 22nd, 2019. And executive session personnel, May 28th, 2019. Okay, and that approval, is there a motion
I move that we approve the minutes with
with the corrections? With the corrections? Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. We move on. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes authorizing the payment of claims, approving the supplemental financial information, approving this human resource activity as amended, approving the following intern request as amended. That's from Idaho State University superintendent intern, Idaho State University student teacher interns, Western Governors University student teacher interns, and University of Idaho administrative intern.
I move we approve the consent agenda with the amended items.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's it. And then the last would be consent agenda. To approve the consent agenda, and that's for the authorized payment of claims.
We just did that.
We did?
Yeah.
Consent?
We've got 'em
That's what you
covered.
just read.
Oh, we did? Losing it already. Okay, next on the agenda, Ms. Fisher, for recognitions.
Let's turn this way for a reason. With my back to you. Good evening. Tonight, we are going to recognize just one endeavor that supports and embodies our district's mission and vision, beliefs, and goals to think more, learn more, and be more together. I invited representatives from Century to join us tonight, but they were unable to attend. So just we'll give you a little bit of information about the accomplishment and then make sure that Century receives the certificate that we have on behalf of this recognition. Century High School was recently recognized by the Idaho High School Activities Association for placing second in the 4A 2018 and 2019 schools of Excellence initiative. In a letter addressed to Mrs. Brockett and Mr. Steve Anderson, it is noted that Century has earned exemplary achievement status due to success in the 3 major areas of high school activities. And those are academic achievement, athletic activity performance, and citizenship and sportsmanship endeavors. A plaque honoring the achievement will be presented at the IHSAA annual meeting in Boise on July 31st. So please join me in commending Century High School faculty, staff, and students for earning this important distinction. Thank you.
Okay. And public comment for items that not on the agenda is up next, but I have not received anything, so we'll move on. The next is proposed fee increases, revenue expenditure budgets for the 2019-2020 public hearing.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Superintendent Howell. We're pleased to be with you here this evening. With your permission, maybe we can take care of the easiest one first, and that would be our the least complicated of the two, which would be the proposed meal price increase for our food service program. Every so often, we need to come before you and talk about increasing our meal prices for our food service program. There is a federal requirement, and I should have looked this up to see what it actually stood for. It's a formula. It's called PLE. And in a nutshell, really what it does is it establishes the minimum amount that we should charge for our food service program based upon a tray cost or a meal cost. And we have to run that from time to time to look to see if we're staying even with what those costs are. Otherwise, you start running in the deficit. And as we have done that for this upcoming fiscal year, we have determined that at least at a beginning point that we need to increase these following meal costs. It would be for our elementary lunch, for the full paid meal from $2.75 to $2.85, which would be a 10-cent increase. Also for our secondary lunch price from $3 to $3.10, and for our full paid breakfast elementary through secondary from $2 to $2.05. State statute requires you as a school board and us as a district to advertise anything that's over a 5% increase. So these increases are actually less than 5%, so there was not the requirement to advertise this in the Idaho State Journal, but we would ask the board to entertain this recommendation and to approve this following our hearing at the next board meeting. So we may have to look at our meal prices and everything come January again after the start of the school year, because that's when we'll get new prices for our food costs, our paper products, etc. And we never know where that will end. But we've been running just barely above the black line with our food service program for the most part, and we have to watch that very carefully now because we do not have much of a reserve in that program. Any questions from the board? Okay, all right. Well, that was the easy one. You have before you the proposed of putting this budget together. Believe it or not, in a district this size, which has nearly $130 million budget, there are at least 40 to 50 people who contribute to this overall budget process. They might be department heads, grant coordinators, other administrative staff, but it's a major undertaking to make this happen. And so we would like to thank them for being timely so that we can meet our deadlines with the state in regard to getting this approved. We have had another good year from the State Department of Education and State of Idaho in regard to overall funding, so that makes this overall process a little bit easier. It's always nice to have some additional funds to be able to do things rather than looking always at reducing budgets and having to cut programs. And so overall, the state put in a little over 6% new monies into our general fund funding formula, which is good news for this coming year. Another bright note is that as a school district, as a Pocatello Chubbuck School District, we did not increase the taxable rate for Bannock County and for patrons in this community. And I think that's another remarkable thing that we've been able to do over time. I'm not so sure that other public entities can say the same in our community, but we have been able to do that. Specifically, we held our supplemental levy at $9.25 million for the 5th and 6th years coming up, so we have not increased that. We will be in the last year of our school plant facility levy, so that is something that we'll have to address in this coming year. And then it's a little unusual, but we do not have any bonded debt right now, and I think that we've been debt-free as far as a district for, I want to say this is going on the 3rd year, if I remember correctly. So those are some highlights in regard to how sensitive we've been trying to be in regard to our local taxes and our tax levies. So let's start with this fund breakdown here. The one thing that I would just draw your attention to is if you look at the general fund, it looks roughly about the same size, but actually the general fund went up about 0.7% from 70.7% to 71.4%. That is largely due to this influx of state revenue that we've seen for this next year coming up. This is a history of the various fund categories that we have there, and just a couple of things to draw to your attention. You can see that overall for the general fund, we're up about $3 million in additional revenue resources for us to consider there. A reminder, when you look at that percent change, that's a percent change from 2017 to 2020, so be mindful of that, if you will. One thing that is kind of interesting, if you look at the second line there, the federal revenue, you'll see in 2019, it has dropped from $9.1 million down to $7.6 million. One of the things that has been happening over the last 2 or 3 years is our special education funds, which are federal dollars. We have had a substantial amount of carryover over the last 5 or 6, 7 years, and that is almost depleted now. And so that is one of the reasons why you're seeing those federal dollars go down like that. And that's something that we've had a discussion about with the superintendent, with our cabinet level staff, as far as having to rethink how we're going to address some of our special needs and special needs programs that we have district-wide. And there may be a larger sharing in the general fund. There will be a larger sharing in the general fund to meet some of those needs. So as you see that number go down, I just wanted to make sure that you understood why that was going down there overall. You can see again that our overall budget is almost $130 million, $129,339,000 overall. These are the various funds that we've talked about over the years that's included under our local funds, federal funds, and state funds. We have 24 individual funds, but we have roughly 50 to 60 individual grants within all those different funds. And so there's a tremendous amount of accounting and compliance and auditing that takes place with all those funds that we receive, both federal and state. This summary statement here of our school budget, these are all funds with the exception of the general fund. And really, I don't know that there's anything that I want to specifically address there other than that's the summary statement for those various special revenue funds. Let's see here. There was one thing that I was going to mention. If you look at the beginning balance between 2018-19 and then 19-20, you'll see that increased substantially. That is because that we carried over the reserve for Pocatello High School from the school plant facility fund. So that's why that jumped up from $8.2 million to $12.6 million there. If you're wondering why that figure's a little out of the ordinary. These other two slides leading up to the Carl's remarks are just the revenue picture for the special revenue funds. You can see here that the state money went up again from 15.75% to 19.66%, and that's, or excuse me, went up. And that's largely due to grant estimates that we have in there for the coming year. And then the expenditures are pretty much in line with where they've been in the past. So without getting into some of the nitty-gritty, I'll just stop there with the special revenue funds unless you have any specific questions that might come up, and I'll let Carl speak to the general fund.
All right. Now, there are a number of slides left in this packet, but don't worry, we're not going to go into great detail on all of them, so someone will just hit the highlights. General fund, of course, is the largest fund in our budget. It's almost 71.5% of our budget for this next year. And when you get into it, and by the way, this format that you're seeing in front of you, and the one that was prior for the special funds, is one that the state requires us to publish. And so it appeared in the paper on June 7th. And so if you're wondering why we do it like this, it's because the state requires us to do it this way. But excuse me. First thing you'll notice when you look at this is that the breakdown of the expenditures are very different from the general fund versus everything else. What throws the other special funds off is basically our school plant, which does a lot of equipment purchases out of that. Otherwise, they might be very similar, but fringe benefits and salaries are the big expenses in our general fund. As we know, we are a personnel-driven entity, and so that's not out of the ordinary for that sort of situation. For this year, we anticipate having about $92.3 million in resources to pay our bills in the general fund this next year, and that includes carryover from the prior year. If you were to look at the revenue breakdown in comparison to the prior year, it's very similar. Federal government in the general fund really only has one revenue source, which is our Medicaid revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so that changes based upon, well, it's pretty steady. And so when we see an increase in state funding, the federal resources will go down as a way of percentage. So that's why you see that fairly significant swing in federal resources in this, when you compare last year's to this year's.
So we make up for the federal loss with state funds? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that because of the consistent amount of the federal funds, it's right around $800,000. From year to year, that stays the same, but when you increase the number of state funds coming in, it takes up a bigger share of that pie. And so that's why there's that significant difference in those federal funds.
Sure, it's a denominator effect.
Yes, it is.
Right.
And it's very different from our special funds when you look at the breakdown. Federal funds is the biggest contributor to special funds, where it's probably it is the smallest contributor in the general fund. So just a comparison so you can see how that works out. When you look at the expense side, as you can see on this particular slide, the black section of other funds is all the capital objects, and that comes out of course, our school plant. And if we were to we're able to take that little fund out of our equation, these would be more equal looking. But other funds also have designated purposes, and so, because we're still a personnel heavy entity, we'll still see a lot of benefits and salary in those other funds as well. But they are quite different, as you can see here, when you compare them as a group. When we talk about general fund, we have to anticipate how much revenue will be generated by the students we have in the system. Because we are paid on ADA, we have to anticipate how many kids we're going to have next year, how well they will attend school, and anticipate what we call a unit, or number of units, so we can determine the number of units the state will fund us and generate that history, or generate those revenues. So here you see what we have anticipated in the way of revenues for this, or not revenues, history, enrollment history for the next 2 or 3 years. After about 3 years, this projection, I know, falls apart, just like any projection. But for 1 year and 2 years, we're darn good on that, and so we're happy about that. And so when we talk about units and how many units we're going to have next year, I'm fairly confident that we're going to be pretty close to what those units say we're going to have.
But from what you've seen of, what's the budget thing they're changing, all of it?
State funding formula.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The state funding formula, do you think they'll do anything with that? They should probably do something with that this year, right?
They tried
Ye-
last year.
Well,
Magic wand.
what we do know.
Well, every year they keep saying that they're gonna do it next year. you know,
Right.
so it's just-
What we do know is it will be probably before the state legislature again next year. And what that means most likely is it will be, instead of 1 year out, it'll probably be another 2 years out. But it's anyone's guess what will actually shake out once they make that happen.
And
So-
whether it will benefit us or hurt us.
What's that?
And whether it will benefit us or hurt us.
Well, yes.
And one of the things that I know that they've talked about, at least what we hear through ISBA, is instead of ADA, they're talking about enrollment, how many kids are enrolled in school. Which in a way,
It's a better
I
deal.
think is better for us, because it, instead of the day-to-day kind of thing of whether kids make it to school or not, or how many kids we have to hire teachers for, I think that may be better.
Well, we do hire based upon how many kids we anticipate in the classroom, based
Right.
upon bodies, but not how many kids we have anticipated in that classroom on an average day, based
Right.
upon their attendance with their
Right.
sicknesses or activities or whatever it might be.
Makes it super hard. 'Cause you don't know.
And so
Mhm.
there's a little bit of a disconnect there, because we do hire on average on membership,
On
but we're funded on attendance.
I think just to draw your attention to one thing here, if you look at 2010, you can see from 2010 going into, roughly 2020, which is a 10-year span, that we're just barely below or above the line of that 12,500 mark as far as student enrollment. And, that's something that we have to pay very close attention to in our community, because as we hear of growth, as we hear of new companies coming to town, as we look at new housing development, especially in the northwest Chubbuck area, Northgate, and those sorts of things, the numbers tell the story as we look at trends. And so we have to pay very particular attention to that, not to overextend ourselves, but not to be behind the 8 ball as well when we look at plant facilities and school facilities and all the things that we have to do in education. So.
One thing we need to pay attention to is how many kindergartens do we have coming in? And some schools had, according to Lori yesterday as we were talking, there was a surprise amount of kindergartners in a couple of schools. And so that might be an indication that we're getting some younger families in and starting that growth pattern over again. Here about 10 years ago, I don't have the data in front of me, we had some very large kindergarten classes come through, and we're dealing with that bubble, whatever you want to call it, bulge in our population, and it's slowly working our way through. And as you see on this next slide, we're going to have some larger secondary classes over the next 2 or 3 years because of those large kindergarten classes that are working their way through the system over the last 10, 12 years. as we talk about our enrollment, there are two major funding sources for state funding: entitlement and salary apportionment. Both are driven on units, and these units are based upon our average daily attendance over certain periods of time during the year. For salary apportionment, it's based upon average daily attendance through the first Friday in November. And for entitlement, which is our discretionary dollars, if we want to call it that, it's based upon the best 28 weeks of enrollment or attendance. And so those best 28 weeks will ebb and flow through the year, but they take the top 28, and that's what we are based upon.
They don't have to be consecutive.
They don't have to be consecutive. A unit could be likened to a classroom. And so this next year, we're anticipating salary apportionment funding for approximately 602 units and entitlement funding for about 595. Our history has been almost 1% different. We could take it to the bank. So 1% different over the course of the year. Our ADA will fluctuate that much. And so I feel confident with these two numbers that we have up in our budget. Entitlement is operational funds from the state. The distribution factor of the unit value increased 3.4%. This next year, for the 2020 fiscal year, we're going to get $28,416 per unit. And that's a $935 unit or value increase over the prior year. Over the last couple of years, we've had this discussion about the increase in the unit value of this discretionary dollars is what we've used to basically help pay for insurance increases. This year, we're getting about $550,000 more in discretionary funds, but we're not going to use it all for insurance this next year, which is very nice to see. And these discretionary dollars go to all parts of the budget, whether it's salaries and benefits or supplies. It's not focused on any one particular area. It goes through the whole general fund budget. Base salaries, this is our salary apportionment. Administrative base has gone up to $37,272, which is a 3% increase over the prior year. And this is the first year since fiscal year 2009, so 10 years, well, actually 11 years, that it has exceeded the base salary that existed back in 2009. So we finally recovered from the Great Recession in our base salaries for administrative staff.
10 years later.
10 years later. Our career ladder base, or this is the pupil pupil services personnel, $48,008, and the teachers on our career ladder are $47,690. So those go into the formula that we use for our negotiations, and so we use those numbers. Our classified base is up to 22,000 and some change, which is also a 3% increase over the prior year. The minimum teacher salary is now $38,500, which is $2,700 more than it was a year ago. And so that career ladder base has gone up that much. And so we've had this discussion over the years that they've increased the minimum salaries more than they have the salaries for those teachers who have experience. This is another reflection of that. The classified base salary equates to about $10.73 an hour. So you kind of get an idea what the state's funding. 16% of our staff that are paid from the general fund are paid less than, they're paid less than the $10.73. I was trying to get it straight in my mind. 83 or almost 84% of our employees are paid more than that reimbursement. And so if you were to look at the general fund and the reimbursement rates, we know that over the years, the state portion of reimbursement for classified salaries is the least amount of the entire employee group.
Okay, so we pay more than what the state pays per hour
For 84% of our classified staff.
for 84% of, okay.
For the administrative salaries, we have that base salary of $37,272. We also have an experience index that we utilize for them as well, and it's between 1 and 2.0 something, but it takes all the experience of our administrative staff into consideration. We have 1.8, and so that means our administrative reimbursement is just a little over $68,500. So that's the average salary that the state gets, or state reimburses us for. There's also a leadership premium that we've talked about over the last several years. We're getting, we should be getting about $680,000 next year for a leadership premium. No teacher can receive more than $9,625, and no teacher can receive less than $900. And
That's in the leadership premium.
that's in the, just in the leadership premium, yes. The maximum paid last year was $4,600, and we paid that to 2 individuals, and this year I did the same calculation, and we have 1 individual getting $4,600. So very similar payout as what we had in the prior year. Balancing the budget, and this is just our general fund. Current revenues are just a little over $80.5 million. Requested current expenditures are a little over $82.6 million. So we're running a deficit when you compare current expenses with current revenues of just a little over $2 million. However, we do have $11.75 million that we have in reserve that we can utilize to compensate for that difference. So we really have just about $9.7 million that we can distribute back into the reserves that we need to have. We have a contingency reserve of 1%, which we're going to maintain, unappropriated fund balance of 4%, and we have an inventory reserve that we keep for inventory we pull into the warehouse during the summer and distribute during the school year. So we have just about $5.4 million that we can continue to put into as a reserve that will carry over into the next year.
Can I make a comment, just really brief on this? Sometimes we are criticized for the fund balance that we have in our district because it does exceed the 5%. But I want to come back to that supplemental levy of $9.25 million that we did not increase. When you take out the next 2 years and you take another $4 million off of that estimated fund balance, then you can see how that drops substantially. And we knew that, you knew that as a board as we set the supplemental levy for the next 2 years. So I think it's just worth repeating and reminding us and as well as the public that we are trying to be responsible, that we do plan ahead, and that we are sensitive to what we go out to the taxpayers for. And when we go out to them, it's for something that we really need, not just something that we want. So, but that fund balance over the next couple of years, we'll probably anticipate seeing that drop because of that. So.
Again, in balancing the budget, we have to talk about insurances because they can come back and bite us from one year over the next. But this year was a good year for insurance. In life insurance, we saw a 0% increase. Vision, a 6% increase, or about 35 cents. PEPM stands per employee per month. And so 35 cents, but we did increase the benefit a little bit on our vision. Dental had a 7% increase, or about $2.30 per employee per month. And again, we increased the benefit there a little bit. Medical went up 2.9, or about $20.50 per employee per month. And our EAP saw a 0% increase. So overall, we saw about $23.15 per employee per month increase in insurance costs, or about $320,000. And we talked about our discretionary funds being about $500,000. We've always looked at that to say, this is how we're going to pay for our medical increases. We got the whole shooting match this year for much less than what we had in that fund. We will not use the VIVA trust this year to offset any insurance increases, so that's the good news there too. We'll be able to use that VIVA trust for a little bit longer. The current salary budgets include 6.2% increase for certified teachers and pupil services personnel. The budget also includes the advancement of one step on the appropriate rung on the career ladder for those employees who are eligible to move. And the average increase, when we looked at the average increase of the folks on the career ladder, it will be greater than 6% because of the inclusion of that advancement. So we know that advancement takes up about just shy of 2% of the monies in there. The number of teacher contract days increased by 1.5 days to 190, so we're back to where we were in the 2009-2010 contract, so no more furlough days. And so we've gone through all of our staff and adjusted the calendars to reflect that there are no more furlough days. And for all the other groups, a 4% salary increase has been budgeted to reflect the increase in state funding. We've already talked about our reserves, and there is that appropriated fund balance we will have to go into next year as well. As in many prior years, the supplemental levy has been crucial, as Bart has mentioned this as well, in balancing this year's budget. Bart did mention as well our levies. We have not increased our levies over the last, or our levy rate over the last 4 years, as it reflected here. So our supplemental levy there at the top there is $9.25 million. We have a tort levy. We haven't actually levied a tort levy. I don't know how many years it has been, because we have some property tax replacement dollars that comes from the state, and we have to offset those replacement dollars on a tort levy or on a levy. So we have more money coming in from property tax replacement than we have in tort levy. So we haven't levied a tort levy in several years, and so we still keep it on our books just so we can have that history, but we have not really levied that against our taxpayers. And so between the school plant and the emergency levy, we have about $15.2 million in levies that we're going to ask our taxpayers to contribute to our fund general fund and school plant fund next year. Our levy rate has actually gone down, which is the good news, because of the increase in property values. And tonight, we're going to ask you to certify the levies as well, so we can get those to the county. I think it's by the first Friday in September. But we certify them tonight, and we are prepared to do that when the county asks for those numbers. And of course, this last page, we talk about the public's ability to review the budget. This document is out on the website, and I know none of you care to really read it anymore, so we just leave it on the website in case you really want to get out there and get into the detail, but that's what it is. It's the detail of what we showed you tonight. And it's out on our website, available to anybody to peruse if they care to peruse through those pages. And so with that, we'll conclude our presentation, and I believe we have an opportunity to open up a hearing for public input.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will conclude with a resolution.
Okay. And now it's time to recess this meeting and convene a public hearing to solicit input on the proposed fee increases and revenue and expenditure budgets for the 2019-20 school year. Anybody would like to speak?
Oh, come on.
Is that enough? Okay, all right. That's, since there is no comment, I will now close the public hearing and reconvene the regular meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt the Pocatello Chubbuck School District number 25 revenue and expenditure budgets, certify the levies, and authorize the appropriations for the 2019-20 school year per the attached resolution. So it's going to be read into the minutes. Is there a motion?
Okay, do we read the whole thing or just?
No, just as I read into the minutes.
Okay. I move that we approve the resolution to adopt the Pocatello Chubbuck School District number 25 revenue and expenditure budgets for the 2019-20 school year, certify the levies, and authorize the appropriations as read into the minutes.
And I would second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing,
It is nice not have to agonize over every little piece.
And would just express my appreciation to all the many employees who take part in this process, in this undertaking.
Well, thank you very much.
when do you actually start the budget process? During the year?
February-ish.
Okay, so 5 months.
Yeah, we ask, we send out data and have all the folks review their, especially the personnel, because that's the highest cost, of course. So we kind of go through that with a fine-tooth comb, make sure everybody's in the right spot, right fund, and they just prepare their requests from there.
Thank you. Hearing none opposed, this motion is passed. Next on the agenda, Courtney, reports. Public relations.
I would also like to express my appreciation for those that do the budget. Somebody has to do the numbers. Better that it's not me. So thank you. This is the Media and Community Relations Report for June 2019. Since my last report on Tuesday, May 21st, there are several items of interest in education news and items of interest that got a lot of traction on social media. So I just want to share some of those topics with you. We continued our educator spotlight from Educator Appreciation Week in April until the close of school. Those posts all performed really well. It's something I want to continue into the next school year, just highlighting our educators in the classroom, just for nominal things to big achievements. I think people really enjoy learning more about the faces and the personalities behind the instruction in the classroom. Class of 2019 graduation got a lot of traction. Our summer food program, those posts, people commenting and looking for menus and interacting with those posts. End of year activities, summer school, of course, and the 2 different sessions for that. We had unit development in here the last couple of weeks, and so we really highlighted what was going on, that our teachers don't just begin summer vacation the day that school gets out, but they are actively in the District Education Training Center, learning and planning for next year to even improve instruction even more. So it's really important for us to get that information out. Headlines, lots of headlines about school districts in the state kind of experiencing some turmoil in terms of boards and superintendent turnover. So we're paying attention to those stories as well. Also paying attention right now to District 93, Bonneville School District is going to be running another bond. They've done several bonds really close together, so it's really interesting to see how their community is reacting to those and what we can learn as we look to the future with some of our own plans. And then Governor Little's K-12 task force has been meeting, and there are some subcommittees, so we're paying attention to what's happening in those as well. Regarding social media, we posted a total of 59 times on Facebook. It's interesting to see now that school's gone down, our traction on Facebook continues to be good. People are still paying attention, which kind of surprised me. We've increased our Facebook likes to 7,541, and our page follows to 8,279, so we're slowly creeping up to that 10,000 mark. Our total post engagement, which includes comments, likes, and shares, was 22,652, which was up previous over the last month. And our total reach was 26,681. Our video views, this has to do with the educator posts, was up 141% over the previous 28 days, and we had 5,488 views. We've increased we're up above 200 on Instagram to 221, and we're continuing to increase our Twitter audience as well. So just really exploring those channels that we can get information out to people where they are spending their time. In terms of Google Analytics, from May 21st to June 18th, this is our website traffic with 20,000 users, which is down from the month before. People aren't actively going to our website because school's not in session, so that makes sense. We had 24,000 new users, 40,000 sessions, which means people are coming back. And then this is also really gives us good information that I will keep continuing to monitor, but the most frequently visited pages, we can monitor that, see where people are spending the most time, where they're frequenting, and make sure that those pages are really accessible to people so that they continue to come back and find the information that they want. So those pages right now happen to be calendars, which makes sense. Human resources, we're hiring, so that makes sense. People are visiting human resources. Our food services, including the summer food menu. PHS home, that one was a little surprising. And then links and forms. So just making sure that all the forms, we're going to be doing some really digging into our website this summer to make sure that the information that we have on there is really accessible to the people looking for it. In terms of community relations, there are just a couple of events I wanted to draw your attention to. The John McCarthy Memorial Golf Tournament is going to be held on Saturday, July 13th. ISU Credit Union is hosting this. It's the 16th annual. Those funds that they raise are distributed in our high school activities fund, so they split equally between the three high schools. And last year, the funds topped $10,000, which was a significant increase. So if you were around on Saturday, June 13th, and want to stop by, even if you don't play golf, they've got lots of fun things going on. I would love to see some participation from School District 25, since that money comes directly back to us and it supports the memory of a fine educator. Also draw your attention to the new educator breakfast. This is a new event that the Pocatello Chubbuck Chamber of Commerce Education Committee is going to be hosting this year in partnership with School District 25 and Idaho State University. We're going to be bringing our new educators from both entities onto ISU's campus on Wednesday, August 14th at 7:30. That will be a continental breakfast. It is sponsored by ISU Credit Union again. And it's really just to welcome new educators into our community and showcase how much the business community is behind education in our local education system. And then proceeds raised through that education committee from the chamber go directly to support initiatives that ISU and the school district collaborate on, such as the on-campus on-campus program, early college program, where we fund books and supplies for students to be able to take those classes. So with that, if there are any questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we move to curriculum and instructions, school safety, and Kent Hobbs will talk to us about student discipline data.
It's a burning topic.
Yeah, it is. Numbers
So
have
in
gone
your
down.
packet is the kind of the breakdown of the discipline for this past school year. And it shows you for the secondary students and for elementary students, the various different kinds of incidences that are reported by building administrators. And you'll notice on the DDRCs that we held this year, we had a total of 193. If you go back over historical records, which we've reported before, we've been as low as 125 back in 2009-10, went up almost to 300. And then when we introduced restorative practices in 2012-13, it went down to 182. Next few years, it was hung around 200. Then the last 2 years, it jumped to over 200, almost to 250. But this year, we're back down to 193, so that's good news. Expulsions are still relatively low. We had 19 expulsion hearings this year. We expelled 3 students. 16 of those were held in abeyance. In the past, last year was a really low year. We only had 11 expulsion hearings. And years previous to that, it had hung in the 20s, as high as 31 way back, or as high as 58 way back in 2009-10. So we're finding alternatives for students, I think, that are very positive, as we've reported before, with our students who are out of our district for a variety of reasons, legal reasons. Typically, we're graduating, at least 1% of our students are graduating with Ms. Whitehead over at the Youth Development Program over with Bannock Youth Probation. So we think it's important that we keep working on finding alternatives for kids and finding ways to deal with kids in schools as much as possible without bringing them here, but we do support them when there's questions of students and their actions in school. So with that burning information, do you have any questions?
Is this your last time in front of us?
This is my very last report to you, wonderful ladies and gentlemen. And thank you.
Well, we'll miss you.
Any words of wisdom you want to leave us?
Make sure you get out of bed every day.
Okay. Do something good.
Are you covering the policy or?
Oh, yes, that's right. I have, yep, sorry, I forgot that.
He was so excited to tell you he was leaving.
So we have, where'd it go? The policy number 8502, which is prohibition of weapons. We noticed in the exemptions section of that policy, there was some really arcane language in there about exemptions for sporting and for, crazy things. So Renee and I worked together to kind of clean that up. And so that there are relatively few exemptions, such as when the fourth grade classes do their Mountain Men programs in the spring, the Mountain Men can bring in non-functioning weapons that they can show the kids. And other than that, it has to be something that's approved by the district office here, either a director or the superintendent himself. So we just cleaned that up a little bit, and that's the reason for that request to look at that policy.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's my last report.
Okay.
Thank you for all you've done.
Yes.
Make them-
Well, thank you for the
But
opportunity.
hope the kids be better.
All
And
right.
good luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Impressive.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Allen.
Ms. Granny,
Evening.
you have a whole list of items, so
I do.
you can start off.
They're all quick. How about that? First of all, I've been asked to just talk to you briefly about the revised special education manual. Mr. Minor's unable to be here this evening, but you'll notice that it's in your packet, and there's also a summary.
It was hard not to notice. It's like 300 pages.
In your packet, there's this, the revised manual for the special education programs, and there's a summary page in your packet, which does detail all the changes, so you don't have to read through all of that to find the changes. Mr. Minor noted that there were no major changes in the manual, and any of the revisions are mainly for clarification purposes. They've added definitions and changed some of the language, but very minor and not any that would, impact the program greatly.
It looked like the big change had to do with that, when they could do alternative assessments.
Right, they spend a lot of time on the alternative assessments, which we have too, talking about it. You'll notice that, and then you'll notice some clarification and some, that was in there. But they spent several pages on changes to the alternative assessment language there. All right, any questions? I can take them back to Mr. Minor. He knows them in much more detail than I do. Or I can attempt to answer them. Next is the 21st Century After School Program update, and currently they're involved in the 6-day summer program. I went over there today, and they were headed out to the Museum of Idaho in Idaho Falls. It's been running from 8 until 5 at Wilcox Elementary for the 6 days. Today, as I said, they went to Idaho Falls. Tomorrow, there's a scouting program that they're going to be having, and then, weather permitting, on the final day, they'll go swimming at the Ross Park Aquatic Center. There are 60 students who are attending the program. Very excited. Next, we have our Head Start report. The ERC for May, the program was at full enrollment with 183 students. 3 children withdrew, 2 moved out of the area, and 1 for another reason. There were less than 30 days, so they were not required to fill those positions. The average daily attendance was 89.75%. The chronic absenteeism for this year was 54 with moderate and 23 with severe absenteeism. Chronic attendance last year was 67 for moderate and compared to 54 this year, so we can see that their efforts are having a positive impact. 23 with severe this year, 40 last year, so that you can see that's always nice when you can celebrate those. Right, Kim? The wait list for 4-year-olds is 5 and 3-year-olds is 7. Non-federal share match. The required non-federal share for the 2018-19 school year was $285,010. The in-kind for the month of May was $85,266.03. The year-to-date was $279,584.82, or 98% of the in-kind. So they did celebrate greatly at Policy Council because some of those classrooms really increased and really worked hard to get their in-kind hours turned in and recorded.
We'd had to,
We applied for a waiver.
We did, and what you have to do is you have to apply for a waiver in case it happens. So as you look, then they came in very strong at the end. So, we're celebrating that we came in strong. So you cannot, if you can't go for it retroactively. You have to say, it looks like we may, so we're going to be cautious and apply for that. So we're 2% short, but still that's way, much closer. And with the, there's a district match that we can put in there for, the building, the lights, custodial, all of that. And with that, then we should be, we should meet that in kind. So that was, a celebration there. Personnel report, all of the full-day program option positions are filled. So, they've gone back through and they're filling those that are going to be, the people who will be working in those full-day positions, which for those classrooms will be full day next year. And so all of the full day are filled, and the full day staff has been meeting this week to plan for next year. Ms. Spray said that it was a real exciting day as they were planning and, looking ahead to some changes in the program. The program is conducting interviews for part-day positions and openings for 3 teachers, 2 teacher assistants, 2 family advocates, and 4 bus drivers. So we'll be filling those positions.
Bus drivers is a new thing, huh?
Bus drivers is a new thing, yeah. That is exciting, and the buses, I think, have been ordered, right? So, that will change the, change the options for some of our families, and I think that's really exciting news. The funding for the 2019-20 continuation grant application is in the final stages of approval, and it should be, we should hear word of that next week. The facilities, so modifications this summer at Lincoln include redesigning the Family Services Office that's upstairs and kind of across the hall from the Policy Council room, or where the Policy Council traditionally meets. And there's more space there to accommodate the additional family advocates and family support staff. And they're also adding additional privacy fencing around the playground, so that's in the works for being added. And now we'll have the Child Spring Outcomes Report. This is Kim Baumgart. She's a Children's Service Manager. You probably recognize her, and she'll share, and I believe it's in your packet, the report.
You should have a slide presentation.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, so for this year, just to give you a frame of reference, the assessment tool and curriculum that we use are based on research about child development. So they rate children according to a range of what it would be typical for children, or what might exceed a typical development, or what might be below a typical development. So we look at below and meeting and exceeding those expectations.
Do you want me to click, or there's?
All right. So this is one of the reports that our assessment tool provides for us. We look at and analyze the data that we have 3 times per year, once in the fall, once in the winter, and once in the spring. If you look at the left-hand side, you see where we were below in the fall, and those numbers are pretty high, which is normal because children are just now coming to what is expected during that range. So we do expect to see the numbers be higher. You'll notice that by springtime, that had decreased pretty significantly, with the exception of math, which we've been working a little bit harder on and will continue to work on. And then if you look over to the other side of it, you can see that we've got a small percentage of children who have exceeded. We didn't change that. It's supposed to be exceeding fall and then exceeding spring. And then in the middle, you get the meeting. So most of our kids are at that meeting level, the highest percentage of them. And the one area that we really want to keep looking at is mathematics. So we've seen that growth. The next page, I forget I have to do that too. This report talks about what is normal or typical growth or exceeding growth. So it's not looking at where they're at in that snapshot, but in this period of time, did they make the amount of growth we would have expected them to make? So sometimes a child may stay within that meeting, but they've still made what we would have expected because it's a range. So, and this one breaks it into 3 and 4-year-olds. So the 3-year-olds, we can see that most of the children in most of the areas were meeting or exceeding the amount of growth that they should have made. Typically, when I go in and look at individual children to see where those below are, what we find are children who were in those that category of missing a lot of school, really poor attendance. So they missed a lot, and we didn't have opportunity to teach them or to collect good data on them, or they're children who have a disability, and so we already know that they're delayed, and their growth also can be a little bit slower for some of those children. So that's where those below numbers tend to fall, and the majority of the kids are making the growth as well as the numbers going up in terms of where they are at this point in time. And then the next page is our action plans. What we've decided that we will do in terms of how we can strengthen things. We'll continue to do training in the outcomes framework from Head Start. We are required to have our curriculum be aligned with that and the Idaho Learning Standards. We've kind of paid a little more attention in the past to the curriculum and the standards, because 3 different things to look at can be a little difficult, but we have found that there's a little more in-depth and understandable information to help us decide where we're rating children with the framework. So we're going to be doing more training with that, more in depth. This year, our PLCs were all focused on assessment. We looked at last year's ratings, and were we getting the information we needed, enough information? Was it valuable information that helped us in planning? So we've done a lot of work on that this year and made a few changes, and we'll continue to work on that. We'll also continue to work with training and using our coach to help our teachers understand that ability to integrate their assessment and instruction, that it all happens at once as opposed to 2 separate things that are happening. We'll also provide coaching now that we have a coach, and next year, we've had that first year, so we have a better idea of where we want to go with her, and we'll be doing some more individualized work with staff who are struggling with some of the pieces of that. We also will be having all of our staff become current with the GOLD assessment tool, reliability tool, so that they're current with being able to pass an assessment that says, yes, I understand how I'm rating children, and so what you're getting from me is reliable and valid information. And then the last page, as part of our grant, we had to submit school readiness goals. We have to submit 1 in each of the 5 domains. So we've picked, along with looking at our data and considering some of the data that you have received through the district, as well as research that's been out there and parent input, we've come up with 5 goals that we'll be working on specifically. We'll work on everything, but these will be our intentional places that we look. So in Approaches for Learning, we'll be helping children to become more familiar with and practice strategies that help to support their focus and attention during activities, so that they then begin to seek and use those strategies with less guidance, so they're able to get that information that we're trying to give to them. In the social emotional area, we'll be looking at helping children to develop strategies for calming themselves when they're experiencing strong emotions, and helping them to learn replacement skills because sometimes 3 and 4-year-olds hit, so we want them to learn a better way of working with their emotions. So we'll be working on those things. Also working with adults to know how to guide them to do that. In language and literacy, we'll be working on making sure that they are meeting the state learning outcomes of knowing at least 10 of the letters of their names, or 10 of the letters, and the ones in their name plus however many more it takes to get to at least 10, and also being able to know the sounds that are associated with those letters. For math and science, we're going to continue to work on our goal this year, that we had this year, of understanding the relationship between numbers and quantities. And then for perceptual, motor, and physical, we're going to be working on fine motor strength, so that we can help support you have found that the children have come into kindergarten with less fine motor skills, and a lot of research out there is saying the same thing, because they spend a lot of time moving their thumbs around. So they don't get a lot of hands-on, so we're going to be working on that to try to increase that as well.
Do you have any specific action plans or goals related specifically just to maybe one to your all-day program?
No, because we're working with the same things for all of the children. They're all the same age. They will, full day will have a little more time to work on those goals and to collect data
So just
than the part day.
nothing
But the goals are
specific
basically
with
the
the
same.
all-day thing? Okay.
Question? Right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the food backpack report. There were 1,432 food backpacks distributed during the month of May. Many schools were taking extra allotments. There were some that had been left over from previous months back there, so they were distributing those to students. There are still some food backpacks remaining, and those will be fully distributed during the summer school programs.
Yeah, I saw that monthly allotment was 1,076, and that 1,432 didn't quite jive. So that's what they just had leftovers,
Right.
ones that they distributed.
And we sent out messages to all of them that said, go ahead and take these. We know that some of our families will be, struggling to
Make it through
feed
the
their,
summer.
and make it through. So anyway, we did send out a message, and they were, you can see which schools there took advantage of that. And then summer school we've alerted both of our summer schools, the extended school year summer school that's to special ed students. We've alerted them that they can come over and grab some and, distribute to families, and also the ones for our secondary students when they're at summer school over at Hawthorne. So, and I know that they've appreciated that in the past, being able to have that, and the students have, so. Anyway, we should have them fully distributed here pretty soon, so within a month, I believe. Next, you'll see the kindergarten registration update with 765 students compared at this time this year compared to the same time frame last year, where there were 767 students, so very, very close there. The schools that remained fairly constant, just an overview, or consistent with last year's enrollment, are Chubbuck, Gate City, Indian Hills, Jefferson, Lewis and Clark, and Tyhee. Schools that are down more than 5 from last year were Ellis, they were down 8, Green Acres 7, and Wilcox 17. Wilcox did have that bubble go through. I don't know if it's a bubble. I can't predict that anymore. We'll watch. But they did have an increase last year where we were kind of holding our breath, and we did have to overload from Wilcox last year. So hopefully the number will be within what we can handle there just at Wilcox without overloading. Those with an increase that were greater than 5 were Syringa, who had 6, Tindoy had 7, and Washington had 15. So that trend of Tindoy and Washington haven't typically been ones that I have noted to you as being increases, and especially Washington with an increase of 15. So, interesting. Interesting is all I can say, yeah. But they're excited to have full classes and to see that. And next are the nursing acuity levels, and that's in your packet. It's the report for the 3rd trimester of school. You'll note that the majority of the students' care continues to fall in level 2, with many of those students receiving nursing support as they are learners with diabetic needs. 2 full-time RNs, 1 half-time RN, I guess there are 3 half-time RNs, and 2 half-time LPNs service our students. And then next in the packet is the Bannock Youth Foundation agreement. This agreement is a routine item that comes to the board yearly for approval under action items. No changes have been made to that agreement. All right. I think
Thank
I
you.
got through it all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a couple of overnight, one out-of-state travel requests that you're being asked to approve. One for a Skills USA, one of our CTE students scored well enough on his tests here that they're taking them to Kentucky. And then yearbooks over to Boise. The Century Yearbook Group goes over and gets training on how to do a yearbook.
I just had to smile thinking of you doing this particular.
I know, you guys were wishful thinking that you were almost done.
No,
Yeah,
it just struck me funny. It just dawned on me, this is your job.
Yeah.
It just struck me too. I was like,
So.
oh, that's right.
And then the attendance policy, we brought that to you last month, and there hasn't been any change. We had one person that gave feedback, had a question about elementary truancies, and that was answered by Lori Craney, and they were fine with that. So we're going to ask for a second reading and adoption during action time. And I'll be back in shortly
With your other hat on.
with the other hat on.
Okay. I believe it's business operations. Start Reed. Mr. Reed.
All right. This thing seems awful long today for some reason. I don't know why. All right, the Idaho General Fund Revenue Report for May. Again, another positive month, which is great news. Overall, through the 11 months of the fiscal year, now the state is just short $22 million. So that's 0.7%. So we've made up a huge difference over the last, well, since April, I guess. And June looks like it's another good revenue collection month, so maybe we'll be right where the budget was revised at the end of the year. So that would be good news for the state of Idaho and for public schools. The eligibility percentages for our free and reduced meals are at the end of the year sitting at 45.32%. Again, that's the lowest that I think that we've seen in quite a number of years. So no different than what we've been seeing the last little while. A new item in your packet is just a report on our attendance incentive program that we've been doing now for, I believe, 3 years. We fell a little short in most of the elementary and middle schools by just a hair over what our goal is. We set a pretty hefty attendance goal for our schools. It's actually at 96% for our elementary. You can see in looking down through that second page there that most of our schools were sitting at 95.88. 95.5, so I mean just maybe 0.5% off at the elementary level overall. At the middle school level, that percent is at 95%, and we came in at 94.5%, so just about 0.5% off there of our overall goal. And not surprisingly, but we're pleased that our high school attendance is sitting at 93.45, so they met and exceeded their attendance goal. And so, when we talk about attendance, funding for attendance versus ADM, which is membership, our district has typically been a fairly high attendance district. And so we're pleased to report that we had a good year, just slightly below some of the goals that we had set in the past. So,
Are kids excused for illness, though? I mean, attendance is something that sometimes people choose, but sometimes they can't avoid staying home.
correct.
Is there any leeway for those who are ill, or is it just?
In regard to this report, no, we purely count whether the students are the learners are in the classroom or whether they're not. And so, no, we don't make those type of exceptions, but we have had a couple of years where we've had an unusual amount of illness and flu and those sorts of things, and maybe that's taken a little bit of toll. But overall, I think we can be very proud of our attendance of our students from elementary through high school.
So it was actually only the high schools that received any reimbursement.
Well, we
Actually-
couldn't let that go unnoticed or unrewarded, so Mr.
Okay.
Reed, if you'll
All right.
comment.
We did do an incentive to all elementary, middle school, and high school. The high school received the largest portion because they met or exceeded the goal. But we did give the elementary and the middle schools also an incentive because they work hard all year long.
And those numbers are high.
Yeah, and you know, when you get that close, you know, we just felt that it was in the best interest to reward them for their efforts and for all the work that they've done, because they do really, truly make an effort to make that happen. Okay, item D is our summer food service program, and I won't go into great detail of all that information that's there, other than just to share with you a couple of things. Our lowest day has been 1,600 meals. And our highest day up to the point where I had this information was about 2,300 meals in a day. So we start off a little slower, but we built up, and the parks are rocking right now with the summer feed program. We do have an audit that begins tomorrow with our summer feed program, and so that's just a one-day audit. Last year, we had very high accommodations from the group that came from Boise with our program in the summer, and we expect much of the same this tomorrow. So let's see. I believe the next one also has to do with summer feed, and that's our negative balance report. There's quite a history here for you to look at, but we ended the year in June at about $6,400 of outstanding negative balances. And again, that's not that unusual. It ebbs and flows. You will recall, though, that we did receive a substantial contribution from an anonymous donor that paid off all of the negative balances this past year. And so this has crept up a little bit, but nothing unusual that we haven't seen in the past. So item F is our wellness nutrition policy, policy 5305. And the information, the changes in here are to be in compliance with federal and state statutes in regard to our federal food service program, and primarily what they are calling measurable goals for nutrition and education. They wanted it more specifically written out, and so we added a small section, a small paragraph under our procedures that you will see there. And again, it's just to meet the audit requirements for this program. So we would ask that the board would hear that on first reading. And I believe, is that the end? I believe that's the end of my items, so.
I have, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smart, Employee Services?
Two short items on my section of the agenda tonight. First being a technology department update. They're busy right now, our technology folks. They're going, the big projects they really are working on is the networking upgrades throughout the district, putting new equipment in. And these switches will, they're actually better and faster. So they're busy doing that, and it takes some time to do all those upgrades. We're looking at maybe some phone updates over the next several months, and so we'll see how that goes. They're not happy with how our phones sometimes work. I think we've heard that around the district quite a bit, haven't we, Mr. Howell?
Yes, we have.
And so that'll be something they'll be investigating and see if there's other options for our phone systems. We do have a VoIP over IP, and so that's there are some options that we have there to increase our phone capabilities there. And of course, right now we have IC. We're in the middle of trying to get a submission done this week, and we've had some challenges. It's the end of the year sort of things, and so we have until Friday to figure all those out, and so we will have that done. Mike, he started out the week, or the end of the week last week, with 12,000 some odd errors on his part that he was able to clear up within a day or two. So there's some challenges, as I mentioned. The next section, wellness dashboard, you have that in your packet tonight as well. And the number we always look at is that,
It's less than 80%.
yes,
They're gonna
that
pay-
medical experience
That's right.
rate for the month.
We're gonna get a rebate, right?
We should, shouldn't we? For May, it was down below 72.5%. So the goal is 80. So we've had several months running where it's been below that 80% mark, and so that's the good news. However, I need to caution our optimism. June and July and August are when teachers will more than likely get some things done if they're needed, because they don't have to take time out of the classroom to get those things taken care of. So we might see a little bit of an uptick, but based upon this, I don't think it's going to be too bad over the course of the year. And so I think it bodes well for our plan for the next year as we look at this data in our renewal next spring. So I won't go any more detail on that, but that is the good news for the end of the year for our insurance plan. So that concludes my report tonight, unless you have other questions or comments.
Thanks. Thank you.
And I'm back.
Who's been?
So, HR, we had sent out contracts in May, and we had a few teachers that were very slow to sign their contracts, and so we went, how many days do they have to sign their contracts? And I had sent out saying we have 10 days to sign our contracts, and we went and looked at our policy, and there was no, it just said it follows Idaho code. Well, Idaho code gives up to 21 calendar days. So we did wait 21 calendar days, and we had one teacher who did not sign their contract and had already called and said they were going to retire, but they weren't going to give me a letter about that until later this month. So we needed to clean up our language in our policy, and so we had added that they'd have 10 calendar days to sign their contracts after the issuance, and should they fail to sign the contract within those 10 days, the contract becomes null and void, and the position will be declared vacant by the superintendent. So we don't just get held hostage forever waiting for somebody to sign stuff. And then there's a few other things that were just cleanup language in that policy, so we're going to ask you to hear that on first reading tonight, and we'll go from there. And that's it for HR.
Why would a teacher do that? Hold out to the last second? Is there that much hate?
Well, we actually had 4. 2 were waiting to find out if their spouses got jobs in other states, and they just didn't know till the last second. And they went ahead and signed their contract, and then you saw in the HR report today that they requested release from their contract because a few days later their spouse did get. And so they were like, what do I do? I'm like, just sign it. We can ask for release if you need to. One was just conflicted about whether to come back or not. Had some major life changes this year and finally decided that no, they just couldn't come back to be teaching next year. And then one, like I said, is planning on retiring, but won't give us a letter saying she's going to retire, and so she said, I'm just going to not sign it, and it's going to lapse. I'm like, okay, well, that's what we'll do then.
So we're looking for a replacement now.
Yes,
That is weird.
but we could have done it, 2.5, 3 weeks ago.
It's a statement.
And so,
State.
I guess. I mean, they had a whole plan on how to, I was gonna say work the system, but that's not nice way to put it. They had a whole plan, and they finally checked in with me, and I'm like, that's not gonna work. And so, well, then I'm just gonna retire, and I was like, okay. So, at any rate, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. My 3 items will be rather quick as well. And so first up is our calendar, and as you made mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, our May had quite a number of meetings, and even the first part of June with graduation and some student hearings and so forth. So we lightened it up on you for the July month. And you can see that just the local issues, I think Judge Murray's meeting, and then we'll be back for board meeting.
Judge Murray's meeting is a week earlier than that.
Oh, even a week earlier.
Well,
Okay.
the 16th is our board
Third,
meeting.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think they're doing it second Tuesday.
Okay. All right, so our board meeting will be back on the 16th. Next up, the item here is in regard to board docs versus what we use now as board book. And as you know, we've had Ms. Johnson come with us the last couple of years to the ISBA convention so that she can learn how to be more efficient and productive in her position. And as such, she has found a program that will allow her to do that very thing. And it will come at a very minimal cost to the district in regard to the board book that we use now, and just an increase of about $200 for the maintenance fee.
And right now, what I saw is you can do that switch, and they waive the
Right.
beginning.
Exactly, and that's why we were looking to take advantage of the setup or fees for the month of June, and so we're bringing it to you tonight. And as you know, we've had a few little difficulties or errors, you might say, when we try to import that tech newsletter. You've seen just a bunch of garbled, and symbols, and it makes no sense. And so maybe we can improve our communications with you, especially in regard to the board agendas. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Johnson to just highlight a couple things for us tonight and share with you.
So this is all web-based, kind of the same as the board book that we're using right now, but it won't import into a PDF, and I think that will kind of create or lessen some of those challenges with that import issue that we've been having. So I'll just show you, I don't know if you can, that one should be on. I'm going to go turn that on because you guys can't see behind you, so.
Agenda.
I think that was on now. I can
Is
see
it on now?
Oh.
Okay. Okay, it's coming slowly. All right, wait for it to get just a tiny bit brighter. But a lot of school districts in Idaho are now using the board docs. And one of the nice things about this program or this online platform is that you are able to search anybody who uses board docs, their agendas, their policies, so that if you have questions about how you want to do something, it's really searchable, which is not the case with what we have. And the other feature that I really liked about board docs compared to what we have is that they have a policies tab to where I can work our entire policy manual within the same platform and easily pull and reference link our board packets to our policies. And that would also be the same thing for our forms. So that would be a really, really nice feature. The one thing I was hoping that we don't get with this basic platform is the calendar option, because sometimes that's an issue. But I think that I will be able to more easily kind of import a calendar into some of these meeting links. But the main difference from what we have right now is that we won't be creating that PDF that you scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. So this is kind of what our meetings would look like now, is that it would have the overall notice of the meeting, and then you would just click through your view agenda. So I'll just go here to their budget hearing and see they have their budget memo, their budget book. So they would basically, you would just click on your link, look at what you need to look at, X out of it, and go right back to your agenda, and everything's over here.
So
And you just go through it
it's
that way.
obviously web-based for you. Will it be web-based for us as well?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That sounds
Yes. So this is what it would look like for you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
This is what ISBA.
Yes, yeah, they're, they've advertised this for many years, and unfortunately, when I first went, there were still a lot of people using board book compared to board docs, and then I think quickly people realized this is just a better option. So a lot of people started switching, and I think me and Lynn Town, is that her name? Lynn Town from Coeur d'Alene, were the last two board book standers in Idaho. So I'm like, okay.
I like my PDFs to get.
Right. So I just think that this looks better, cleaner, easier to sort through, and then you can see, easily which ones have attachments and which ones don't, and then easily just pull those up and X out of them.
But yes, I think the main thing for me is just the ease of putting these agendas together is a lot more efficient than what I have right now, and then plus having that policy manual right there on the same platform, so.
Well, it
Anyway,
looks
if
like
you-
it'll be more navigatable
Yes,
for us.
that's what I think.
Because I know sometimes we'll get into the middle of our packet,
Mhm.
and then
Trying
it's
to get
time
back.
to get back
Right,
to
the
do
bouncing back
the
and
action
forth.
items. It's like,
Yeah.
wh-
Right,
now
this
what?
way easily you can show everything right over here to where even if you're in the middle of looking at this, attachment or item, you can go right back over to here very quickly.
And if you're reading almost 700 pages,
Yes.
you can't do it at one sitting.
Right.
That's right.
Way easier to keep track of where you're at and, yeah, so, I'm hoping that you're agreeable to this format and we'll move forward if you are, so.
Looks good.
Okay, that's the second item. And then the last one is the superintendent evaluation instrument or tool. And as you know, we had some training with Chrissy and David last fall, and we looked at this as an option. And so tonight, Renee and I have cleaned it up, spent a little bit of time tailoring it more to our district versus the generic version. And so that's being presented to you tonight for adoption. And then you'll see the timeline in the front,
I saw the timeline.
Starting next month.
Mr. Manson, and that we will meet more often and have an opportunity to talk about things as we move forward. Student achievement goals and a couple other goals for the district.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yep.
Yep.
Looks good.
Okay, it looks a little more cumbersome, but that just goes with the rubrics that provide a lot of clarity versus our old system of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of thing.
Arbitrary numbers that mean nothing.
Sort of, yeah, yep.
How do you tell?
Okay, all right, Mr. Hanson, then.
Well, we sent that into the state, the old one. We sent it into the state. We had to sign it, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And now we're gonna go to this one. They're gonna accept this one.
So what it is we just mark in the IC report whether I'm proficient, essentially. What we sent to the state was the contract.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, that's-
because that one was a little bit different.
Okay.
Uh-huh, yeah.
And before we get to public comment, I just have one question. One thing we didn't talk about was the curriculum
Uh-huh.
items. That didn't come up tonight at all, and I noticed there were quite a few significant things from the curriculum.
There's some exciting stuff.
Yeah, some from the curriculum, so, and I don't know
The
if we have to
curriculum
approve that.
committee report is in there.
If we approve those curriculum changes tonight or not,
Do we approve those? I think the curriculum committee did
Yeah.
that.
we, okay.
It's just.
Those were all
So-
voted on in the curriculum
Right.
committee.
Because usually it goes to the board too.
For things that we purchase, but not for actual changes.
Action items, yeah. that-
Well, some
just do the
we have
committee.
because we
Uh-huh,
have
a
to
few.
recuse ourselves
Yeah,
voting in
Mhm.
curriculum meetings because of that.
yeah.
So I just wondered if any of those items were things we should have said, like they have a new forensic, or not forensic, but forestry.
Yeah, they
yeah.
happened to get a
Aquaculture.
teacher whose background is that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
But some of the activities that came up that are related to that particular position are really neat for kids, I think. As I listened to it in the curriculum committee meeting, there are things that are there for kids to explore
yeah.
that are not part of, I wanted to go back to school when I heard some of them.
Well,
Sure.
and I know I felt badly about the graphic arts program because I saw some really cool things from Pocatello High School in graphic arts, but when I visited with you, Doug, you said that the interest has waned.
Yeah, the numbers, the enrollment
have waned.
has.
And so what are you replacing that with now? I'm trying to remember here. Is it a business? There was something with
I think
combining business and
Economic.
business and
Yeah.
economic.
Personal
and
finance.
Personal finance,
Yeah,
okay.
for economic.
That's what it
And-
was.
Yeah, I just happen to have it
Yeah.
right here.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that we should mention
That's
those
not a bad
things.
And
I
often
think
those
it's
things are
great.
related,
I-
in that particular case, the teacher who's teaching that course at Pokey, he's actually qualified to teach it in such a way that kids get dual enrollment credit. Not all of our teachers can do that, but to me, and some of it was the things he's teaching, then they don't get credit for all that they've learned.
Well, and I saw that they'd had some problem working with ISU with that, but it said that they had, Lisa was working on it and they were working that out. So I assumed that happened. Anyway,
It is happening.
okay. Okay, that's all. I didn't hear any mention of that, so I
Okay,
just wanted
yep.
to bring it up. Okay, sorry.
No problem. Now it's time for acceptance of public comment on pertinent to agenda action items. And I have not received a notification that anybody wants to speak, so we'll move on. We'll now move to, let's see, first item of business is to adopt the revised special education manual. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt the revised special education manual.
I'll second.
A second. All those, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Hearing none opposed, the motion is passed. Next, as business is to hear on first reading, policies 5305, wellness and nutrition, policy 7105, contracts, and policy 7312/8502, prohibition of weapons. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt the policy numbers.
Here, first reading.
Oh, that we hear on first reading the policy numbers just stated. Because I can't find that section yet. I don't know where it went, but it went somewhere.
Should be like page 5 or 6.
Okay.
It's on page 7.
Oh, is it?
Well, I don't
I
even
think,
know
will
where.
you try clicking down here?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, because that's
That
fine.
didn't work?
That's fine.
Oh, no.
On page 6.
Try that one up there.
Okay. Okay, anyway, I make that motion.
We'll share. I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? None.
You're there.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, the motion is passed. The next item of business is to approve the Title I Bannock Youth Development Agreement. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the Title I Bannock Youth Foundation agreement.
A second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Hearing none opposed, the motion is passed. Let's see, the next item is to approve the out-of-state overnight travel requests.
I move that we approve the out-of-state overnight travel requests.
I'll second that.
Okay, for a second, so any discussion? None. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So the motion is passed. The next item of business is to hear on second reading the policy, adoption policy of 8101, attendance of students.
I move we hear on second reading for adoption policy 8101 on attendance of
I will
students.
second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And none opposed, so the motion is passed. See, the next item is to approve the board docs agreement per Renee.
I move that we approve the board docs agreement.
And the second?
Second motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the motion is passed. And the next item of business is the superintendent's evaluation tool, which we're gonna need a lot of learning, let's just say, work. Fine. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve that superintendent evaluation tool.
And I second that.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion is passed, and that concludes this meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, the motion is passed, and we are adjourned.
Okay.
Well, I gotta hit this, don't I?
There you go.
There you go.